Hey everyone! In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make these little cuties, including how to sew on the face by hand. The template is freely available thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you enjoy these videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You'll also have a chance to win one of these in a giveaway. I'll provide a link to both my Patreon and my pattern in the description. Cut out the template and trace it onto your fabric. Add the A to D markers on your fabric as shown. I used a marker on my template so that the lines are visible from the other side of the paper. When it comes to the feet, I recommend drawing them on without seam allowance. Then folding them over as shown. Sewing on a larger piece of fabric prevents your sewing machine from eating them. After sewing, cut away the excess fabric and turn them in the correct way. I used a pin for assistance. Just be careful not to stab yourself. For the whiskers, I found some stiff, thick felt. I cut off a thin strip and then cut it into 4 lengths. Each one is a bit over 2 inches. They will be trimmed down later, so don't worry if they're a bit too long. Use the face template to line up the feet and the whiskers with the placement markers. You should have something that looks a little bit like this. We're now going to attach the sides to the front and back pieces. As shown, start with pinning the ears. Then line up the pen markers and pin. These are just indicators, so if they don't match up perfectly, it's okay. Add extra pins if necessary. I personally like to add extra pins to the curves. Only pin up to the last marker, as we're not going to sew the whole thing just yet. Your side pieces should be sewn onto the right hand side of the front and the back piece. When sewing these together, it is important to leave a long enough tail thread attached to the ears. Do not cut them off, as they will be useful later when we sew the full plush together. We're now going to pin these 2 sewn pieces together. Start with the ears and the top of the head. Then, like before, pin the fabric where the markers meet up. Leave the bottom section until last. When you reach the feet section, between the feet fold back one side of the fabric and pin it into place on both the front and the back face. The other end of the fabric can just be pinned over the top. When turned in the right way, no raw edges will be showing. You want to begin sewing where one of your side seams end. This way you can sew the entire pinned section in one go. When sewing, take it nice and slowly. My video is sped up quite a lot, so don't feel like you need to sew really fast. When you reach the ears, you can use the tail threads that were left attached to help pull the fabric through. When you're finished sewing, it's important to trim away the excess fabric around the ears and cut small snips between the ears and the top of the head. These will help the fabric turn in the correct way. You don't need to cut too close to the seams. Sometimes I even put my fingers over the seams to prevent accidentally cutting them. When it comes to stuffing, I start with a very small bit of stuffing and make sure the ears are properly stuffed. I then feel the plush from the ears downwards so that the stuffing in the ears can't come back out. Continue stuffing your plush until you're happy with its fullness. If you have a cat hair brush, you can use it to brush out any fur that got caught in the seams. Now we can take the whisker length indicator and cut off the whiskers to the right length. We'll also want to close the gap at the bottom of our plush. So take some pins and pin the gap closed. We want to take a matching color thread. The way I knot is to pass the thread through from somewhere else, leaving a long enough tail that I can easily cut it off later. Then I knot the fabric in the starting position. This way I don't have to hide the threads later or worry about knots slipping through the fabric. The stitch I'm using to sew up the gap is called a ladder stitch. I'm sewing even-sized stitches on one side of the fabric and then the other side of the fabric, just like a ladder. When I reach the end of the gap, I knot the thread again and pass it through to the back of the plush. Pull the thread taut and snip it off. The excess will disappear into the plush. I will use the same knotting and pass-through technique for all hand-sewn elements. When it comes to hand sewing the face, I used felt for the eyes and the mouth. I did a lot of snipping to get the two circles to be the same size. I actually recommend trying out some black buttons for the eyes. I just didn't have any on hand. I used black thread to sew the eyes and the mouth. The black thread blends in really well with the black felt, so if the stitches are a bit messy, it won't matter because you'll hardly be able to see them. It's difficult to see the stitching I'm using, but I'll be using the exact same stitching on the darker patches later, so for a better idea of what I'm sewing here, please watch the dark grey sections later on. I spent a lot of time pinning and tweaking the mouth. I sewed it on when I was finally happy with it. I've got a dark grey felt for the rest of the details. For the top of the head details, I spent a bit of time cutting out the felt to the correct shape. I then use pins to keep them in position. To create the side detail, I used the side template to cut out the correct size felt pieces as well as to line them up on the plush. When it comes to creating the tail, cut out a piece of felt that is the same size as your light grey piece. Cut up the template as shown to get the right sizes. Pin the larger end piece onto the fabric and sew a straight stitch to hold it in place. Then sew a zigzag stitch for decoration. Mine was about 3mm wide. Use the template cutout as a spacer. The light and dark sections are exactly the same size. The same as before, sew a straight stitch and then a zigzag stitch over the top for decoration. When all the applique is done, fold the tail piece in half and pin. If you want to be neat, make sure you line up the dark and the light sections. Use the tail template to draw on the shape and then sew it up. Cut off the excess fabric and turn it in the correct way. The tail has quite a lot of fabric and it is small, so you might have difficulty turning it in the correct way. If this is so, use something thin and pointy, like the end of a paintbrush or a chopstick. With the tail in the correct way, poke the raw edges of the fabric inside the tail and pin it so that you can't see these raw edges anymore. The tip of the tail gets pinned next to the foot, and the rest of it wraps around the side of the plush. For neatness, put the tail seam towards the back of the plush. This way it won't be visible from the front. When you're happy with the placement of your tail, grab some light colored thread and sew it into place. I only sewed around 3 edges, leaving the front section unsewn. It's already sewn on 3 sides, so it doesn't need to be sewn on the front. It also looks neater from the front if you can't see any stitching. At the tip of the tail, I stitch a few extra stitches for reinforcement. Now they're done and they look adorable. If you'd like to see me make a tutorial on a giant pusheen, let me know. Otherwise, if you have any other suggestions or feedback for future videos, I would love to hear it. Thanks for watching and good luck!